Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for our presentation from Portland Mountain Rescue on climbing Pahto, also referred to as Mount Adams. I'm Jess Joyner with Mountain Shop, and tonight we're joined by Marty Ramirez, who's a volunteer with PMR, as well as an avid climber of the mountain. Pahto was Marty's first summit, and even after going on to climb mountains across the world, he still considers this his favorite one. Marty will give us some info on the mountain, the south side route, and he'll go in depth on planning and gear, and we'll give tips for new climbers to get up and down safely. If you have questions tonight about the mountain or about Marty's presentation, we're going to stop after each section and we'll just pile them into the chat and then we'll answer them so they kind of stay with the material. So just type them into the chat before we move into a new topic section. We'll get to it. And with that, I'll pass things over to Marty. Welcome, Marty.
Thank you. So I'm real glad to be here. Again, I've been climbing for about 25 years, but Mount Adams is still like my favorite climb of anything. It was my very first climb 25 years ago. And so, I'm going to intersperse some of the stories from that because I was the, sort of the test case for all the things you could do wrong on your very first climb. And so it's nice for me to have that opportunity to kind of share with you some of the things that I did wrong because I just really didn't know what I was doing. So let's get started kind of at a high level. Where is Mount Adams? I always enjoy flying from the East Coast back to Portland, and you fly by the mountains and you see them out the side, out of the right side of the plane. And every time we do it, someone says, "Oh, look, there's Mount Rainier. There's Mount Rainier." And really, it's always Mount Adams. Mount Adams looks somewhat similar to Mount Rainier, and you get a really nice flyby when you fly, especially from, say, Boise to go into Portland. So a little bit of high level about what Adams is. So it's a mountain. It's about 12,300. So it's getting up there. To a point where some people can have some altitude issues when you get up there. It's the second largest volcano by volume. It's heavily trafficked. Approximately 14,000 people. The good thing is there's a lot of different routes on the mountain. However, 90% of the people will attempt it via that south side. But again, it's got a really long climbing season. I always go the first or the second weekend of August because I love it because the Perseid meteor shower, when it happens in August, and you've never seen anything until you see that from, say, if you camp on the lunch counter. So the most traveled routes, the summer route tends to be the Cold Springs up the South Spur. And then the winter route is up the Mazama Glacier. If you go a little bit early, in the season in June, as you get and have to mount this ridge right here, you can get cornices. And so depending if you're early, you may have to divert and go around that, which makes for a really long extra hike. But generally, if you go from, say, now to the end of the season, it'll be the south route, and it'll be melted all the way up to, where you mount the glacier, where you hit the Crescent Glacier. So what's the south route like? The first two bullets, you have to put them in context. It says moderately strenuous. It depends on how fit you are. The first time I climbed it, I was really big into cycling, and so that's all I did. So you build pretty good lungs, but you don't have any impact muscles, and so all that pounding and pounding and pounding will just shred you. So make sure you get some good hiking out there, so that the quads and stuff get hammered a bit. It's also classified as a non-technical climb, although in pretty icy conditions that the movement from the lunch counter up to the fall summit, although not technical, can be pretty scary for some people because there's a lot of exposure there when you're on that. The slopes are relatively moderate. Depending on your experience, 35 can be pretty overwhelming. I think at this time of year, you can actually go up the route and stay on scree if you choose to do so once you're past the lunch counter, or you can stay on snow. I mean, because it really is going to depend on the footwear and the conditions that you have, but it starts to melt out about this time of year, and you can do, quite a bit of it on scree. You do really have to have some backcountry skills and experience out there. The avalanche safety is mostly if you're going to go out there and ski in the wintertime. The snow travel, you do need to feel comfortable. Most of the lower part of the mountain, it'll be kind of not very steep, and you don't need crampons or anything like that. But once you get above the lunch counter, depending on conditions, you may have to use crampons, and so it's good to have practice what that's like. Not only what it's like to walk in them, but how to put them on, especially if it's in the dark. The other thing I would mention is the weather. It's really interesting that I've climbed all over the world, but the worst storm I've ever been in was on Mount Adams one year. And it was just this freak thing where a storm cloud came in. It was at 6 a.m. in the morning. And it was an electrical storm, and we got caught with horizontal lightning and everything like that. So plan for that. That even if the forecast says nothing, there's going to be not a cloud in the sky. Out there in the summertime with the heat, these storms can pop up out of nowhere, even at times of day that make no sense. You can usually do this route two ways. One, you can do it in one big long push, or you can do it in 2 days. The first time I did it in 1 day, and thought I'll never do that way again, just because I didn't know what I was doing. But now I tend to do the full day one if I'm training for a bigger climb, because it's a really nice training climb to do that. But it's a really long haul. I have a lot more fun when I do it over 2 days, and I'll show you what that looks like, where you camp and stuff like that. But I really enjoy that because I love laying up there on the lunch counter in a bivy bag and seeing the stars and the galaxy. And I mean, it's just unbelievable up there. So kind of just a couple things on gear. And I'll just highlight a couple of them. And one is water. So there is not a source of water up there when you start. When I did it the first time, we got 2 hours into the approach hike, and then the guy I was with said, "Hey, where do I get water?" So, he had nothing but empty bottles at that point. So do bring plenty of water. You can probably melt out some water up once you get up to the lunch counter. But you have to be careful because a lot of people are up there, and you definitely have to boil that stuff if you're going to do that. The other thing I would mention is sun protection. Again, the first time I climbed, we did it in 1 day. We left at midnight, and so putting sunscreen on wasn't top of mind to me at midnight. And then by the time the sun came up, I was so wiped out, I forgot to put it on. I can tell you, I had a sunburn so bad that my skin actually bled. So, now my wife has me put it on before I even leave the house, regardless of the climb, because you definitely don't want to forget that stuff. And then all the rest of it is pretty common sense stuff. The ice axe crampons, it depends on your skill. You can do it without them. But if it's really icy, then it can get kind of dicey. Next, around permits. So they are required. It depends on what time of year you go. So you need the self-issue one that's at the trailhead. It's just one you fill out like a lot of trailheads, and that's all year long. Once you go above the 7,000 foot, if you're going to, depart to go above 7,000 feet. If you're going to climb the mountain, then you do need to get the the permit, which is great now because they're available online. It used to be you had to go to the ranger station to get them, and so you had to go there when they were open. But now you can get them online. I checked it out. It's pretty easy. It's pretty relatively inexpensive. $10 if you climb on a weekday, 15 on a weekend. So and it helps with maintaining things up there. And do know that you do need that Northwest Forest Pass if you're staying below that, to leave on your car, so you don't get a ticket for that. A couple things about the mountain and thinking of others. Again, more than 10,000 people climb that a year. So you really need to take care of your waste and bring, pack it in, pack it out. Because especially up at the lunch counter, because most people do that 2-day and it's camping up there, and people use that as a source of water as well. So you really want to be careful of that. Which leads me into, that dreaded thing that no one loves, which is the blue bags, right? And these are for packing out your human waste. It's just a part of mountaineering. You kind of get used to it. It's funny because I see people who, they don't hesitate to pick up their dog's poop with their hands, but they just can't deal with packing and, doing this. But, it really does, because if people left up on the mountain, it would just be a terrible experience. And it still is pristine up there. And I don't see a lot of, so people really do follow the rules. So let's talk a little bit about the route itself. I'll go into a little bit of detail if you really have an experience. So here's a kind of a side view. Again, most of it is on that south route that begins down in the Cold Spring campground, and then it's a hike, through what used to be woods, but there was a pretty devastating fire, and so it's just sticks now. So that approach is really hot and sweaty. And then you get to the point where you're actually going to get to the glacier, and then you mount this ridge, and then it's pretty, it's just snowfields after that, not too steep. Depending on the time of day, it doesn't really matter if it's icy or not. You don't need crampons to do it. It's not steep enough. And then you get to what's called the lunch counter. So if you're camping, this is generally where people will camp. It's before you actually start the push to the summit, which is that big haul up the up until you get to the fall summit, which is aptly named when you get there, because you have a little valley that you have to walk across, and then you have another summit that you have to do as well. And the weather can change. You're kind of shaded from the weather until you get to the fall summit, and then you're fully exposed. If there, in the summer, there's some pretty whipping winds that kind of go through there, and so the conditions can be very different on the true summit approach as it is from the fall summit. Just depends on the weather at that time of day. So again, it all starts at the Cold Springs campground. Some people camp there to get ready to do, if they're going to do a 1-day push. I've never actually camped there. Usually if I'm doing a 2-day, I'll get to there around 2 o'clock, because that gets me up to the camp around 6. And if I'm doing it at night, I just drive in and usually depart around midnight or so and just park the car. There's, it tends to be, it's a lot better now. The roads are a lot better, and the parking is a whole lot better than it was before. Because at times in the past, you'd get up there and you had nowhere to park your car. So the route itself, generally speaking, it melts out, around this time of year. So it can be early, it can be a little bit later. I think this year it's around now, starting to kind of melt out a little bit. But you'll still have the crushing glacier will still have snow on it, and you'll still have snow, an opportunity to go up snow from the lunch counter. Right? It's a long climb. It's 12 miles. It's 6,800 feet of elevation. That's why it makes it such a great training climb if you're going to go to the Himalayas or something like that, because it's a nice simulation of a summit day. Again, it winds through. this slide was done when there was a forest. Right now, there's not a lot of trees there, so it's really exposed to sun when you first start. But eventually you'll get to, the Crescent Glacier, which depending on the snow year can be sooner than later. And then again, 35 degrees is about the biggest incline, but when it's ice, 35 degrees can be kind of scary to some people. So here's a better picture of to give you a sense of kind of scale. Again, there's the summer route, and then the winter route. Again, this is from the campground up. It's pretty open. There's generally not any snow until you get to the Crescent Glacier, and then you want to mount up onto this ridge, and then it's pretty straightforward to get up to the lunch counter. It's pretty hard to get lost on the way up, and sometimes you can get lost on the way down. The climb itself, to give you some sense of timing. So the 1-day climb, it's going to take you 10 to 12 hours to do it. You generally start, and it says leave before sunlight. I mean, I tend to leave at midnight because that usually puts me back to my car around 4 p.m. But it's up to you. Some people leave first thing in the morning, but then you tend to have to come back in the dark, which I don't tend to like to do that. The trade-off is you don't have to bring as much stuff. You don't have to bring any camping gear or anything like that. Although you do really want to make sure you bring a headlamp for that. If you do the 2-day climb, again, I prefer to do that. Again, it's from the car to the lunch counter, it's 3 to 4 hours, just enough to break a sweat. And then from the lunch counter, it's about 3 to 4 hours to get to the summit. And then boom, you come all the way back down from there. Some people bring tents. Since I go in August all the time, I bring a bivy bag because I really like to have my head out and look up at the stars because it's just unbelievable up there, especially if the meteor shower is happening. And then that last point, and I learned this the hard way, is it seems pretty obvious that you'd be able to know where your camp is because you left from it. But when you're coming down and you're looking at this big field of boulders, it's pretty hard to sometimes to find which one's my camp and so forth like that. So it's just something to be aware of. This is a more recent photo. So this is what I was saying, that approach hike looks like this. It used to be so nice because it was all forested and in the shade. But now it's kind of sad because it really burned everything out on that part of it. Once you get done with that trail, you're going to mount the glacier. You can walk in your boots. It's nothing is too steep. It's pretty obvious where to go because you'll see the pyramid and you'll know the lunch counters in front of that. So route finding is not that difficult unless there's weather. You'll come up and you'll actually approach up to the lunch counter, and the lunch counter is actually over here. And so if you're camping, you'll be up in these rocks up here. And if you're going straight up, you just hang a left, and there you go up to the false summit. This is a picture from some climb that I did to kind of give you a feel. So there's a lot of rock walls, so you're sheltered from the wind when you set up your camp. And they're pretty they're everywhere. And so I've never gotten up there and not been able to do it. So this particular climb, we did something right. We actually, we wanded our camp so that we could actually find it. I think the mistake we made that climb was we were lazy. And so see how far away we are from the beginning of the snowfield. Then, first, 5 a.m. in the morning, the next day, we had to walk across that in the dark. And much better to put your tent right there towards the base of it so that you get up and you hit the snow right away, as opposed to hiking in boots and then having to put crampons on later. So just something to consider. It's pretty tempting to hit the first rock wall you hit and say, that's good enough. This is what the route is once you're from the lunch counter. I show a straight line. If you're a super stud climber, go for it and go straight up. I tend to do sweeping traverses on this thing, just to protect, to keep my knees and my muscles much better. So, I do a lot of back and forth and back and forth, and you get in a rhythm, because this really is a long slog. It just seems to kind of take forever. You can't really see, but there's some undulations in it to where you're going and it looks like it's the top, but then it's like, oh no, I'm only going over another one, and then I have another one to get up to that false summit. And that thing is called the false summit for a reason. So this is looking from the false summit, and you can see there's another summit, which is really debilitating the first time you see it, even though people tell you there's a false summit, because it's a really long slog from here across this valley. And then again, now you have to start another climb, another thing to go up. And again, it depends on the time of year. You can do it on the scree, or this particular picture looks like there was a lot of melt out. Generally speaking, in August, this will still be all covered. And so you definitely will need crampons on this. It's steep enough, especially if it's icy. And then if you manage to do all of that, you get to the summit. And the conditions at the summit, these pictures were all taken at the same time of different years, because I always kind of like to do it, that first 2 weeks of August. So you can see, like in the upper right or upper left, that was a year where it was still completely covered in snow. Everything was covered. There's actually this really large, there used to be a sulfur mining operation up on the top. And so you can actually see when it really melts out, which it's done over the last few years, you can actually see the entire building. It's funny because for the first 15 years I climbed, I didn't even know it was there. And now every year that I go up there, I see that up there. But it used to be a mining operation, and they actually used to bring mules all the way up to the summit. So, mules climbed that route for many, many years, until they just petered out. But again, that building's up there, but that picture in the lower right, that wasn't me, because that would a really dumb thing to do, to be standing on that, because that thing is probably 100 years old and really deteriorating. So just be aware of that when you're up there. I threw in my picture from my very first summit. So 25 years ago, the guy on the right, he went on to climb the 7 summits. He was really he was very experienced, but he didn't help us much. And so, we managed to get up there in spite of ourselves. And, so it was just a, glorious day, to get up there. Which then leads me to the way down. And so, you probably know this, that, most of the time people get hurt on the way down. And, generally speaking, this mountain is pretty safe. The only thing that, there's only a few things that you need to watch out for when you're coming down this mountain. The first one is glissading. Coming down from the false summit back to the lunch counter is probably the most fun glissade on the planet, in the right conditions. It's phenomenal. I went one year where the sides of the chute where people were glissading was over my head, so it was like being in a luge thing, and it's just great because there's a lot of run out and so forth. So in the right conditions, it can be the most fun you've ever had on snow. Navigation, generally speaking, it's pretty straightforward. There are a couple places where you can go wrong, and then weather can completely change everything. And so you need to, play in, and then human factors as well. And I'll kind of touch real quickly on each one of those things. So glissading, so a couple things. So know how to do it. And that means the number one thing I would say is make sure you take your crampons off. I have seen a lot of broken bones on rescues from people who left them on, and then they catch a point while they're going down, and something gives, and it's usually the leg bone. So you got to take them off. Have an ice axe, because sometimes you need to. It gets out of control, and you need to stop. And then pay attention to the snow itself. That there are times where we went too fast and we got down and it was icy, and you really don't want to do it if it's too icy. And then the last thing I would point out is gloves. I've only been hurt one time on a mountain, and it was on that mountain where we were coming down and it was really icy and I wasn't going to glissade. So I have crampons on, and then I said, forget it. And so I was kind of exposed, and it took my gloves off to take my crampons off. And then, it was kind of sketchy. And so I just, started glissading, and then had to self-arrest, and I self-arrested all the way down the mountain without gloves on. And actually cauterized, and all you could see were the bones on my two fingers. So good lesson there. Again, it's the only accident I've ever had on a mountain, and now I wear gloves no matter what the weather, and I never take them off. So just something to be aware of. It's like little things that mistakes you make that can just, really ruin your day. So a few things on glissading. It's really about control. That you really want to lean back. You want to be careful when you use your legs. Rely on that ice axe, and if it feels like you're out of control, then just roll over and self-arrest, because you can get screaming down that mountain. And it's good to practice. So as you're going up, practice on something that's a little less steep, just so that you get a feel for it. So how you roll over, because I've seen people roll over and they don't have their hands quite right on the axe, and it just rips it right out of their hand. And in that, again, if you don't get hurt, it's still a bummer, because you got to go all the way back up and get your axe, which I've seen people do. A little bit on navigation. I said again, it's not too difficult to come down in good weather. In bad weather, you really want to be prepared, because everything changes. It just really changes, and so you just have to be kind of prepared for that. And what that means is, on your way up, pay attention to what it looks like and turn around, or drop some tracks on your GPS on the way up. You may not need them, but that time you need them, you wish you probably would have done it. Again, about your camp at the lunch counter, mark it, because even though you say, there's no way I can't see this thing from when I come down, you'll wander a lot around on the boulders if you didn't do something to make your camp unique, because that lunch counter is a pretty wide expanse. And then this is something that I do is, I have my GPS preloaded with all the waypoints and everything, and I just put it in my pack. And, just in case. I mean, I've never had to pull it out, but it makes me feel good knowing that if there was a big whiteout and I needed to get down, I know how to just turn it on, and it's going to help me. It just gives you some peace of mind on the mountain, but I don't rely on it, because batteries only last so long, so you have to be careful with that. A little bit about the human factor. Things that, especially if you've never climbed before and this is the first one, just being, this lack of awareness that you hadn't really thought it through, of that you can't just say, I'm going to go do it. Well, I guess you can say you're going to do it, but it is somewhat physically taxing. So you need to be aware of that. And you need to be aware of altitude. Different people react different to altitude. And so, for me, it's pretty much, I have this trigger after 11,000 feet, and then I need to be really careful because I have a reaction to that. So hydration, sunscreen, fitness. You know, there's a lot of things you can do to help, but you need to be aware of that because different people react different ways. You know, I've seen people, you know, get mountain sickness on, you know, Mount St. Helens. So it can happen, and it doesn't really, it's not a measure of your fitness, it's just biology sometimes. Then the last thing that I would mention, being part of mountain rescue, is if something goes wrong, especially on Mount Adams, because it is pretty remote. You know, it's not as bad as Jefferson, but you know, it takes time. You know, and things can happen. You know, like this scenario here is an actual event that we experienced. We didn't experience. We went on a rescue for that. You know, where people got a little bit offline, they had a great day, and then someone blew out their leg, and the whole world changes then in terms of how do you get help. So a couple things to be aware of. You know, that, you know, if it happens, you know, it's about safety. Are you exposed? Making sure the person is taken care of, kind of figure out, you know, what are the things that I need to be aware of, the problems, and then how am I going to react to that? I think the biggest question you'll have to ask is it really an emergency? Because I'm going to show you in a minute how long it takes rescue teams from the time you call to the time they get to you and get you down. So you want to think about that, whether it's really a life-threatening thing. Can you self-evacuate? But if the answer is no, then, you know, it is time to ask for help. And that mountain is difficult because cell phone coverage is extremely spotty. And so, you know, how are you going to actually ask for help? Because things happen on that mountain. You know, it's not a mountain that is within our, you know, PMR's jurisdiction, although I've been on, you know, 4 or 5 missions, but, you know, it happens, and it's really remote, and it takes a really long time. And so you need to think about that as, how would you even get help? You know, if you send somebody down, by the time they get to their car, there's really not cell reception there. So driving in, you know, it's just, you really don't want to be in that situation. Mount Adams actually falls under the purview of the Yakima County Sheriff's Office. And so they have their own search and rescue team there. They do have helicopter support, you know, coming out of Whigby, but be aware that, you know, weather plays a role in that, you know, they can't go in all conditions. And so, you know, it usually has to be life-threatening before they'll dispatch the helicopters to come out and do that. So just, you know, kind of be aware of that. It's not something that you can just demand. There's a lot of factors to get in, because it's really dangerous for the pilots. So this is what I was talking about a minute ago. So this kind of gives you a timeline of how long a mission, you know, a response can take. So, you know, the second column, or, you know, from the left, is the amount of time it takes for each one of those things, and then the cumulative amount of time is on the far right. So you can see it takes a while. You know, that there's, you know, you have to get from the 911 to the sheriff to the SAR unit. They have to activate the unit, and then they have to get there. I mean, the SAR units are all volunteers, and so, you know, they have to leave their jobs or whatever, and then driving to Mount Adams takes a long time. So it can take a really long time, and then they have to climb up to them, assess and treat, and then evacuate them down. So, you know, 14 hours is a long way to wait if you don't have to, especially if the conditions are really bad. So, you know, a lot of people don't understand that it's not like everyone jumps in a helicopter and they're there. It takes quite a bit of time to mount a rescue operation on a mountain, especially one as remote as Mount Adams. Again, some of the stuff that kind of can slow us down. You know, we are all volunteers, and so, depending on when it happens, sometimes it's hard. And so then they have to go to another rescue group and get more people, and then, weather and darkness, play a factor in for us because we have to get there and drive there and so forth like that. Just a couple of things to be aware of. So while once you've made that contact, really make sure you take care of everyone, keep everybody warm, keep everybody, hydrated, keep the morale up because it's going to take a long time and people can't, it's really hard for you to wait, especially if someone's really injured. But just make sure you get everybody as comfortable and safe as possible, and really try not to move around, or at least let the sheriff's department know if you have to move because it's not a safe place to be or something like that. Once the rescuers arrive, that's what they do. Don't offer to help unless they ask you to help, because there's certain protocols for medical and stuff like that. This is what they do, and they'll take care of you. They'll get you down, but they really need to take the lead, especially when they first get up there and to get a patient packaged and treated. Getting close to the end here. So a couple of resources that I think are helpful. The first one is, the actual Forest Service, it's a website just for climbing Mount Adams. So there's some really good information about permits and routes and what's the status of the route and has it melted out? Is the campground open? So that's a must to do. The next two are, they're kind of cool because Summit Post and Alpine Savvy, it'll help you kind of see people that have just climbed, and they'll have photos and they'll give you the beta on what the conditions are like. And then there's some weather ones in there. Again, where Mount Adams sits, you can get some pretty decent thunderstorms that aren't forecasted. They can come out of nowhere. And then the last one is avalanche forecast if you're going into winter. I've not done that, but a lot of the PMR guys go up there, to ski the chutes up there, and they just, there's a certain time where they're all gone because they're up there because they want to do that run. And then, oops, I'm sorry, I actually opened up the. And then, I'll just kind of end with, a little bit about Portland Mountain Rescue. Their mission is yes, it's rescue, but they really are all about mountain safety. And so they do a lot of outreach like this kind of presentation to people to help, to educate people. And so it's kind of nice to be part of an organization that's, it's not just a bunch of people that want to just go rescue, but that they really want to help people to have a much more enjoyable experience in the mountains. It's 100% volunteer based. We have about 100 field deployable members. Just an amazing group of people. A lot of doctors and nurses and unbelievable climbers. Some of the most fit people I've ever been around. All dedicated, but all volunteer. They'll drop everything, no matter what, to come out. We operate under the jurisdiction of the Clackamas County Sheriff, so all SAR come under something. So most of our missions tend to be on Mount Hood. Although, like I said, I've been out to Adams, I've been up to Rainier on certain missions. It just depends on how it works, in terms of, if a unit's already on a mission, then they'll call us in. We tend to, the way that it's kind of split is that Portland Mountain Rescue tends to have the south side of Hood, and then the Crag Rats, which are under a different jurisdiction, have the north side route. But we flip back and forth a lot depending on how big the mission is. We are a nonprofit organization. We don't charge anything for rescues, nor do we get anything from the government. We're very fortunate that the people we rescue and the people that recognize what Portland Mountain Rescue does donate. And so we've been self-funded and actually created enough of an annuity to be funded forever. So it's really nice that, the dedication to the, from the unit is really about, the rescue and education and not having to worry about a lot about the fundraising piece of it. So that's pretty much what I had in terms of a formal presentation. I guess we can open it up if anyone had any questions about it. Hopefully that was thorough enough to kind of give you pretty much anything you would want to know about going up that mountain.
Yeah, there was one question, but it was just on the mileage. I'm curious, is the summer route in right now, or is it still the winter route? And do you know when that kind of switches over usually?
Yeah, so the summer route is open now. There's no cornice there. The weather that we've had over, it was really interesting this year because we had a lot of good snow in the winter, and then we had March, April, May of just sun, and it melted out pretty quick up there. So it's about perfect between now and mid-August to go up there because there's still enough snow to do it. But you can get all the way, without having to alter the route, because that's kind of a bummer because it really makes for a really long day.
Yeah. We have a question that just came up. If you have any recommendations for training hikes leading up to Mount Adams.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff in the gorge, because there's some really good elevation gains. Like Larch Mountain is a really good training climb because it's got a lot of miles in it. Anything that goes uphill, just so you get some pounding, and carry the weight, because that was the thing I really underestimated. For the longest time, I'd get on the exercise bike or do the stair stepper, and I think over time I just learned the best way to train to climb is to climb, right? That it just if there's plenty of stuff in the gorge, to go up, that gives you that 3,000 to 5,000 elevation gain in a hike, and it's just perfect training for any of these mountains.
Yeah. Yeah, I second that. The gorge is a great place. Also, Mount Defiance has a lot of elevation gain. It's a little bit more brutal, maybe than Larch, but still a high elevation.
Yeah, it's funny though, that anyone can climb it without training at all. You could, but it's a lot more fun if you've trained and you're fit, because you could do it, but it wouldn't be a lot of fun if you didn't actually spend some time training. Because I've taken people up mountains where they didn't do enough training. They got up, but they didn't have as much fun as I did.
And then how many pounds of gear would be typical to pack in for a 1-day hike?
I would say, for the 1 day, somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds is pretty light. Most of it's water, more than anything. I usually take 3 liters or 3 liters with me. And I'll still have to melt something, cook something up, because that's just not enough, to do the climb. So most of it's water that you need to carry.
And then mapping tools. Do you have any recommendations for good mapping tools that you like to use?
I have a GPS, but I also use on my phone. There's one called Gaia. I'm not exactly sure how you spell that.
I think it's GAIA. Gaia.
Yeah.
Gaia GPS.
I love that. We actually use that on rescues. It's that good. They have a free version, but it's not very expensive to buy it. The maps are really good. It's really good for dropping pins and doing routes. And if you do the paid version, you can map out all your routes online on your computer and then download them to your phone. It you don't have to have cell reception to use it, so it doesn't like suck your battery or anything like that. But that's the one that I've been using for the last 10 years. It works really well. It's very accurate.
Let's see if there's any more. Oh, we just got a long note. Oh, that there's no water. This is from a former Mount Adams climbing ranger, and actually an old Mountain Chef employee who I never worked with, but hi, Ron, you're kind of a legend. So he says, no water at Cold Springs Trailhead. So that's the campground there where you're going to start. Summer route is posted to 8,600 feet on the ridge. I think he means just kind of there's wayfinding there. And yeah, pack up your waste and trash and micro trash, which you kind of covered, but there's so many people who use the mountain. And if everyone left like a tiny piece of a granola bar wrapper, there would be trash everywhere. So yeah, just be good about packing stuff out. He says we took out 25 to 30 pounds each weekend last year of trash. So that's a lot. That's all I have for questions that came through. So thank you. Thanks, Marty, for taking the evening to go in depth about the things to consider when climbing Pahto. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining and participating. We hope this webinar was informative and inspires you to learn more and expand your mountaineering knowledge to tackle some awesome routes and objectives this season. Marty, if anyone has follow-up questions, is there a good way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I can give an email.
Back to me on that, and I can.
Yeah, I can give you I'll drop you an email address, and because I have a whole lot of other materials on that and a lot more photos of the route and things like that if people are interested.
Awesome. Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I'll just include Marty's information in the follow-up email, and this presentation will be posted on YouTube. So for anyone, if you had friends who maybe wanted to see it and didn't get a chance to join, they can watch it on our YouTube channel. Just make sure I got everything. Yep. And I think that's it. So thanks for joining us. Stay cool. We'll see you around. Thanks, Marty.
All right, you bet.
Bye.
Bye.